He slammed the door so hard the windows rattled in their frames. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet, frosty air. And there I was, Agnes Pembroke, 70 years old and standing on my own son's front porch in nothing but my flannel nightgown and a pair of threadbare slippers. The snow had started to fall harder, little icy needles stinging my cheeks. I could hear the deadbolt turn with a final sickening thunk. Go to a retirement home, Mother. I don't care. I hope you freeze. Those were the last words my son, David, shouted at me before he sealed me out, trapping his own mother outside in the middle of a February night in Buffalo. The cold was a living thing already seeping through my slippers, clutching at my ankles with bony fingers. But you see, what David didn't know, what he was too angry to see, was that our neighbor, old Arthur McAllister, was watching from his kitchen window. And Arthur, a man I'd only ever exchanged pleasantries about the weather with, held a secret that was about to turn my son's world upside down. My name is Agnes, and until 3 hours ago, I thought I was a beloved mother and grandmother, having a simple family dinner. I'd been living with David and his wife Chloe for nearly a year. It was supposed to be temporary, a soft landing after my Harold passed away. 35 years of marriage ended not by choice, but by a silent, cruel heart attack in his sleep. After the funeral, the loneliness in our big empty house was suffocating. David had been so kind, so insistent. Come stay with us, Mom. We have the space. Emma would love to have her granny close. The argument tonight started over something so small it was laughable. I'd merely mentioned that the faucet in the guest bathroom had a persistent drip. I'd offered to pay for a new washer, suggesting David and I could fix it together on the weekend, a little project. Innocent, right? A mother trying to help. Wrong. Chloe's face had tightened into a mask of pure irritation. Agnes, must you constantly find fault with everything? This is our home. We'll manage our own repairs. I was only trying to be helpful, dear, I'd said, my voice calm. At 70, you learn to let the first wave of nonsense wash over you. After 40 years as a head librarian, I knew how to maintain order in a storm. Helpful, she'd scoffed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. You've been here 10 months, Agnes, critiquing everything from my cooking to how we raise our daughter. And David, my David, the boy I'd raised to have a backbone and a kind heart, just sat there staring at his plate, nodding along like a meek little puppet. Mom, he finally said, not meeting my eyes. You have to see this from our perspective. This is our house. Our house. The house I'd given them $25,000 towards for the down payment. The house where I'd been paying a third of the mortgage since I arrived, buying all the groceries, and keeping the place spotless because Chloe was always too exhausted from her part-time bookkeeping job. I see perfectly, I said, standing to clear the plates, my hands trembling slightly. I'll start looking for my own place tomorrow. That's when David exploded. With what money, Mother? You're living here because your pension doesn't stretch far enough. Dad's life insurance is long gone, remember? The cruelty in his voice stole my breath. My own son, weaponizing my grief and my financial situation. The situation that existed partly because I'd been so generous with them over the years. I have options, I whispered, the words feeling flimsy. Chloe let out a harsh laugh. Like what? You're 70, a widow. You have a teacher's pension and Social Security. You can't just go out and get an apartment. I have you, I said, the terrible, vulnerable truth slipping out before I could cage it. David's face twisted into something I didn't recognize. We never asked you to depend on us, Mother. We were doing you a favor, but we have our own lives. Emma needs her own space as she gets older. Chloe wants to start a home business. There just isn't room for everyone. So what are you saying? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'm saying maybe it's time to consider other options. There are some very nice assisted living facilities. You'd have your own space, activities. Assisted living. For a perfectly healthy 70-year-old woman whose only crime was outliving her husband and trusting her family. I am not ready for a home, David. Well, you can't stay here forever. And that's when I made my fatal mistake. I got angry. Forever? I've been here 10 months, David. I contribute more to this household financially than your wife does. Chloe's face went sheet white. Excuse me. You heard me, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't felt in decades. I pay a third of everything. I do the cleaning, I help Emma with her reading, I cook most of the meals. What do you do besides complain about my presence? That was the match to the gasoline. David started screaming about disrespect and boundaries, about how I'd been poisoning his marriage since day one. Chloe was weeping dramatically, playing the wounded martyr. It was a dizzying, terrifying spiral. The next thing I knew, David had my arm in a firm grip and was marching me toward the front door. You need to cool off outside for a few minutes. Think about how you want to handle this. David, it's snowing. I'm in my nightgown. Then maybe you'll think faster. The door slammed. The lock clicked. And there I was standing on the porch watching the snow collect on the railing, my bare arms prickling with goosebumps. I banged on the door for what felt like an eternity, my fists growing numb. No answer. Just the indifferent whisper of the falling snow. Panic began to set in. My car was in the garage, but the door was locked. I was truly trapped. Just as I was wondering if I could make a run for the neighbor's house without collapsing, I heard a voice. Agnes? Good heavens, woman, what are you doing out here? Arthur McAllister was hurrying across the lawn, a thick tartan robe thrown over his pajamas, his feet stuffed into unlaced boots. His kind, wrinkled face was a picture of shock and concern. Just a disagreement with David, I managed, my teeth beginning to chatter, humiliation warming my cheeks for a fleeting second. In your night clothes? In a blizzard? Nonsense. You're coming to my house this instant before you catch your death. I started to protest, but he was already taking my elbow, his grip surprisingly strong for a man of his years. He led me across the 2 snowy yards toward the warm golden light of his home. Arthur, I can't impose. My sister Beatrice is visiting from Toronto. There's plenty of room. Now, not another word. As we reached his doorstep, he paused and looked back at David's dark, silent house, his expression hardening. Agnes, he said, his voice low and serious, there's something you should know. About your son's job. I stopped, shivering for a moment, arrested by his tone. What do you mean? He opened the door, ushering me into a blissful wave of warmth. My sister Beatrice, he said. She's the senior vice president of operations at Sterling Global. She's been David's boss for the last 2 years. The world tilted on its axis. David worked for Sterling Global. If Arthur's sister was his boss, that meant the man leading me into his home held the keys to my son's entire professional life. And as I stood there, thawing in Arthur's hallway, I had a feeling he was about to hand those keys to me. Arthur sat me down in a worn, comfortable armchair by a crackling fireplace and wrapped a heavy wool blanket around my shoulders. The heat felt like a miracle on my skin. He brought me a cup of tea, the steam carrying the scent of honey and lemon, and I cupped it in my hands, feeling the life slowly return to my frozen fingers. Meanwhile, my son and daughter-in-law were, I presumed, sleeping soundly in their warm bed, utterly unconcerned with whether I was alive or turned into an ice sculpture on their porch. Beatrice is upstairs on a conference call, Arthur said, settling into the chair opposite me. She'll be down shortly. Agnes, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be perfectly honest with me. I nodded, the tea warming me from the inside out. How much do you know about David's performance at work lately? The question surprised me. I know he's been stressed, working late. He seems tired, distracted. He mentioned a big account he was managing. Arthur's face was a careful, neutral mask. What else has he told you? Not much. He's never been one to share work details. When I ask, he just says it's fine or busy. I studied his concerned eyes. Arthur, what is it you're not telling me? Before he could answer, a woman descended the stairs. She was in her late 60s, tall and impeccably dressed in a silk blouse and trousers, her silver hair cut in a severe, elegant bob. She had Arthur's kind eyes, but they held a sharp, assessing intelligence. You must be Agnes, she said, her voice firm and clear. I'm Beatrice. Arthur told me what happened. I'm glad he found you. Thank you for your hospitality, I said, feeling a little overwhelmed. I'll be out of your hair first thing in the morning. Arthur and Beatrice exchanged a look that spoke volumes. Agnes, Beatrice said, pulling up a footstool and sitting directly in front of me. I need to tell you something about your son, and I need you to promise you'll hear me out. My stomach tightened into a cold knot, colder than the porch had been. Is David in trouble at work? David has been on a performance improvement plan for the last 4 months, she said, her tone matter-of-fact but not unkind. It's a final warning. His work has been subpar for nearly a year. Missed deadlines, careless errors. More concerning, there have been attitude problems, conflicts with his team. I set my tea down, my hands trembling again. Conflicts. Insubordination. Petty arguments. Last month he shouted at a junior analyst in the middle of the office. HR had to get involved. He never said a word. There's more, Beatrice continued, her gaze steady. 2 weeks ago, David came to me with a request for an emergency salary advance. He said he needed $8,000 to cover medical expenses for you. He claimed you'd been diagnosed with a severe respiratory condition and needed a specialized treatment not fully covered by your insurance. I felt the blood drain from my face. Beatrice, I have mild arthritis. I haven't had so much as a cold since last spring. Arthur leaned forward, his expression grim. Agnes, did David ever give you $8,000 for medical bills? Good Lord, no. Never. I looked between them, the horrifying implication dawning on me. He had lied. To his boss. To get money. Beatrice nodded, her lips a thin line. I approved the advance. He was very convincing, talking about his worry for his mother. The money was to be deducted from his paychecks over the next 6 months. Was to be. I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He's already requested an extension on the repayment, claiming the deductions are causing financial hardship at home. The room seemed to spin. He had stolen $8,000 by lying about my health, all while complaining that my presence was a financial burden. Beatrice, I asked, my voice shaky, what happens if an employee defaults on an advance obtained through false pretenses? It is grounds for immediate termination, she said without hesitation, and given the amount and the deception, the company would be within its rights to pursue legal action for fraud. The word fraud hung in the air between us, ugly and final. My son a fraudster. Agnes, Arthur said softly, there's something else. Last week I overheard Chloe at the grocery store. She was on the phone very excited, talking to a friend about a cruise they'd booked for April. The Mediterranean. A cruise. I stared at him, stunned. They're planning a Mediterranean cruise? A very expensive one from the sound of it. She was discussing private shore excursions and a suite with a veranda. The hypocrisy was staggering. A luxury cruise while my son was stealing from his employer and trying to shuffle me off to an old folks' home. Beatrice cleared her throat. Agnes, I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you have any way to prove you haven't had these medical expenses? Insurance statements, doctor's notes. I thought quickly. Yes. I have my Medicare summary notices from the last year. They show only my annual physical and my prescription for arthritis medication. Nothing for respiratory issues. That would be very helpful, Beatrice said. You see, if David lied to obtain that money, this isn't just an internal matter anymore. It's potentially criminal. I sat back, the weight of it all pressing down on me. My son's job, his freedom, his family's security. It all hung by a thread, and Beatrice held the scissors. What are you suggesting? I asked, my mind beginning to race, the old librarian's knack for research and strategy stirring back to life. I'm suggesting, Beatrice said carefully, that you may have more power in this situation than you realize. Whether David keeps his job or faces prosecution rests largely on my recommendation. His entire world is balanced on the edge of a cliff. I looked from Beatrice's determined face to Arthur's sympathetic one. Understanding dawned, slow and sure. You're saying I have leverage, I said, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. I'm saying that when David wakes up and finds his mother spent the night at his boss's brother's house, he might be very interested in having a much more respectful conversation. A slow smile spread across Arthur's face. Sometimes, Agnes, the universe serves up justice with a side of snow. I picked up my tea again, feeling a new kind of warmth spread through me. A fierce, burning warmth of righteous anger and newfound strength. My son had thrown me out into the cold. But by morning, he was going to learn that he'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. Beatrice, I said, my voice steady for the first time all night. What time do you usually arrive at the office? 8:30. Why? I think David and I need to have a conversation first thing in the morning. And I think it would be very helpful if he knew exactly who he was dealing with. Outside, the snow continued to fall, a silent, beautiful blanket of white. But I wasn't cold anymore. No, I was just beginning to warm up. And I had a feeling David was the one who should be worrying about the freeze. I woke at 6 in Arthur's cozy guest room to the sound of frantic knocking. Not on Arthur's door, but next door. Peering through the frost-rimed window, I saw David on his own porch, dressed in pajama bottoms and a coat, hopping from foot to foot. Locked out. It seemed Chloe was a heavier sleeper than I was. The poetic justice was so perfect I almost laughed. Arthur appeared at my door with a tray bearing coffee and toast. Karma has a swift and satisfying sense of timing, he remarked, his eyes twinkling. Should I feel guilty for enjoying this? I asked, taking the blessed coffee. After what he did. My dear, you should enjoy every last delicious second. Beatrice was already at the kitchen table, dressed for the day and typing on her laptop. Agnes, she said, looking up. Before you go over there, we need to discuss your strategy. You have options. I'm listening, I said, sitting down. Option 1, Beatrice began, counting on her fingers. You go back, apologize to keep the peace, and continue living there under their thumb. You'll have a roof, but you'll be a prisoner in your own family. I shuddered. Unacceptable. Option 2, Arthur chimed in. We use what we know. You reset the balance of power. David learns that actions have consequences, and you negotiate a proper, respectful living situation from a position of strength. And option 3? I asked. Beatrice's expression turned stern. Option 3. I handle this strictly as a corporate matter. I terminate David for fraud and file a report with our legal department. You find your own solution, and David faces the full consequences without any family interference. I sipped my coffee, watching David through the window as he finally managed to get back inside, probably through the garage. He was probably getting an earful from Chloe right now. The symmetry was divine. What would you do, Beatrice, if he were your son? She didn't hesitate. Option 2. But strategically. You don't go in guns blazing. You go in calm. Let him think he's still in control. Let him reveal his hand before you show him yours. Exactly, Arthur nodded. The key is to let him talk. Find out what their real priorities are. How much financial trouble are they really in? I was starting to like this plan. So I go back, act like the chastened mother, and see what they say when they think they've won. Precisely, Beatrice said. Meanwhile, I'll be preparing for a very different conversation with David at the office. My phone, which Arthur had kindly charged for me, buzzed with a text. David. Mom, where are you? Your car is here, but you're not in the house. Are you okay? I showed it to them. Arthur snorted. He locks you out for hours and now he's worried about a morning walk? The nerve. What should I tell him? Tell him you're fine and you'll be home soon, Beatrice advised. Don't say where you are. Let him sweat. I typed back, I'm fine. I'll be home shortly. We need to talk. The response was immediate. Mom, I'm so sorry about last night. I lost my temper. Chloe and I feel terrible. Can we please start over? They feel terrible now that they don't know where you are, Arthur observed dryly. Another message came through. Maybe we can figure out a better arrangement for everyone. A better arrangement, I mused. How interesting. Beatrice was typing on her laptop. Agnes, I'm pulling up David's file. I want you to see the full picture before you face him. She turned the screen toward me. David's personnel record was a chronicle of decline. His performance ratings had plummeted from exceeds expectations to fails to meet standards. There were multiple written warnings for unprofessional conduct and absenteeism. This is worse than you mentioned, I said, my heart aching with a mixture of pity and fury. I was trying to be gentle last night. The truth is, David was already on the verge of being fired. The fraud is just the final nail in the coffin. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Arthur, may I borrow something to wear? I want to look formidable. Of course, he said, smiling. What's your plan? My plan, I said, standing up straight, is to be the sweet, apologetic mother they expect. I'm going to listen to their generous new offer. I'm going to ask gentle questions about their finances. I looked out the window at David's house. And I'm going to let them tie the noose all by themselves. Beatrice grinned. Excellent. And Agnes? She handed me a crisp white business card. Take this. Keep it in your pocket. A reminder of who is really in charge here. What time is your meeting with David? I'll schedule it for 11 o'clock. That should give you enough time. Perfect. Give me 2 hours with them. Then we'll know how this will end. I went upstairs and put on a simple but elegant navy blue cardigan and slacks of Beatrice's. I looked in the mirror. I didn't see a helpless, discarded old woman. I saw Agnes Pembroke, former head librarian, strategist and survivor. David and Stephanie thought their power was absolute. They had no idea they'd just awakened a sleeping giant. By the time I walked back into that house, I would know everything. And then David was going to get a phone call from his boss that would shatter his world into 1,000 little pieces. I knocked on my son's front door at 8:15 a.m. David opened it instantly, his face a mess of relief and anxiety. Mom! Thank God! Where were you? We were worried sick. He pulled me into a hug that felt desperate, not loving. I found somewhere warm to stay, I said simply, stepping back into the lion's den. Chloe emerged from the kitchen, her smile so bright it looked painful. Agnes, we're so glad you're safe. I made scrambled eggs and toast. Your favorite. Scrambled eggs weren't my favorite, but I smiled graciously. How thoughtful, Chloe. The dining table was set with their wedding china. A vase of fresh flowers stood as a centerpiece. The performance was beginning. Mom, sit please, David said, pulling out my chair. Chloe and I talked all night. We handled everything wrong. I sat and waited. The truth is, David began, I've been under immense pressure at work. A huge promotion is in the works and the stress, well, I took it out on you. I'm sorry. A promotion? I asked, layering my voice with maternal pride. That's wonderful, David. It's not final yet, he said, avoiding my eyes. But my boss has been giving me more responsibility. It's a department head position. Would mean a significant raise, better benefits. More responsibility, like being on a final warning. A department head position. The lies were so smooth, so practiced. That's fantastic, dear. You've worked so hard. The words tasted like ash, but I swallowed them down. Chloe reached over and squeezed his hand. We're trying to stay positive, but the waiting is nerve-wracking. I can only imagine, I said sympathetically. Is there anything I can do to help? They exchanged that rehearsed glance again. Actually, Chloe said, we wanted to talk about your living situation. We love having you, but the house is feeling crowded. And with the promotion, we'd be in a better position to help you find a wonderful place of your own. And what kind of place is that? I asked, my voice all innocent curiosity. Well, David jumped in. We've been looking at some excellent independent living communities. Places with great amenities, people your own age. There's one called The Gables that's just beautiful. We drove by last week. Last week? The Betrayal was so cold, so calculated. And how much would a place like that cost? I asked, stirring my tea. About $3,500 a month, David said. But we'd help, especially once the promotion comes through. $3,500. Money they plan to get from a job he was about to lose. That's very generous, I said. But I'd want to pay my own way. I couldn't burden you. Mom, be realistic, Chloe said, her voice dripping with false concern. Your pension and Social Security wouldn't cover that. You don't have the savings. Actually, I said, watching them closely, I've been looking into my options. There might be some benefits available to me. Assistance programs for seniors. David's eyes lit up with a greedy interest. Really? What kind of benefits? Oh, various things. Housing subsidies, utility assistance. I need to make some calls today to see what I qualify for. That's great, Mom, David said, looking immensely relieved. If you could get some assistance, it would make this transition so much smoother. Speaking of transitions, I said, setting down my teacup. When were you thinking this should happen? Another shared glance. We were thinking by the end of the month, Chloe said brightly. That would give you time to get settled before spring. 2 weeks. They were giving me 2 weeks. 2 weeks is rather soon, I murmured. We know it's fast, David said. But honestly, Mom, I think you'll be happier. More independence. Your own space. And Emma? I asked. Won't she miss me? Of course she will, Chloe said, her smile tightening. But she's growing up. She needs her space. And you could have her for sleepovers. She'd love that. The picture was complete. They wanted me out immediately, and they were hoping I'd foot most of the bill with mythical benefits. This all sounds very well thought out, I said, finishing my eggs. I appreciate you thinking of me. They both looked like they'd won the lottery. So, you're okay with the timeline? Chloe asked, barely containing her eagerness. I'll need to make those calls today. Visit a few places. Of course, David said. Take all the time you need. I looked at my watch. 8:45. Beatrice would be at her desk now. Actually, I should start making those calls. Time sensitive, you know? Absolutely, Chloe said. Use the study. No distractions. I stood up, the very picture of a grateful mother. Thank you for breakfast. And for being so understanding about last night. Mom, we really are sorry, David said, standing too. You're right, I said, my voice soft but firm. You should be. I walked toward the study, feeling their hopeful eyes on my back. In my pocket, Beatrice's business card felt like a talisman. Phase 1 was complete. I knew their plan. I knew their lies. And I knew their desperation. Phase 2 was about to begin. And it was going to be a reckoning. At exactly 11 a.m., I was standing in the sunroom of the Gables, admiring the wilting begonias and pretending to be enthralled by the bingo schedule, when David's phone rang. He looked at the screen and went pale as a ghost. It's Beatrice Sterling, he whispered, his voice strangled. My boss. I have to take this. He hurried outside into the courtyard, and through the large windows, I watched his life fall apart in real time. His shoulders slumped. He ran a hand through his hair, then pressed his palm to his forehead. When he ended the call, he looked like a man who had seen his own grave. Everything all right? Chloe asked when he returned, her voice thin with panic. I have to go to the office. Now. There's an emergency meeting. An emergency meeting, she cried. We're in the middle of something important. Mom, I'm sorry, David said, his eyes wide with fear. This can't wait. Of course, dear, I said, my voice the picture of maternal concern. Work comes first. Is everything all right? You look terribly worried. I'm sure it's nothing, he said, but he was trembling. Probably just a paperwork mix-up. A paperwork mix-up. Yes, fraud was just a simple mix-up. The drive home was silent and tense. David gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. Chloe stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched. When we pulled into the driveway, David practically leaped from the car. I have to change into a suit, he mumbled, bolting for the house. Margaret, Chloe said, grabbing my arm before I could follow. What did you think? Isn't the Gables lovely? Even now, with her husband clearly in crisis, her primary focus was ejecting me from their lives. It was very clean, I said. The residence seemed nice. So you'd be interested? I'd need to see more options, of course. But it's a possibility. I gave her a gentle smile. Chloe, is David all right? He seems more than just stressed. Has he been having trouble at work? She hesitated, wrestling with how much to reveal. He's been working toward this promotion for so long. Sometimes the pressure gets to him. Has he mentioned any specific concerns? About his job security. Her head snapped toward me. Why would you ask that? Well, he seems genuinely frightened by this meeting. And this sudden urgency about my moving out. I just want to make sure I'm not a financial burden you're too proud to mention. Her laugh was brittle. Don't be silly. We're fine. In fact, we've been planning a cruise. The Mediterranean in April. We've been saving for ages. Saving. While taking my money and committing fraud. The audacity was breathtaking. A cruise. How wonderful for you, I said. Very expensive, I imagine. We got a great deal through David's company, she said, the lie coming so easily. I simply nodded, storing the information away. Back inside, we could hear David thundering around upstairs. He came down minutes later, dressed in his best suit and looking like he was going to his own execution. "I'll call you when I'm done," he told Chloe, not meeting her eyes. He left, and the house fell into a heavy silence. I went upstairs to the guest room, closed the door and called Arthur. "He's on his way to see Beatrice," I said quietly. "Beatrice just called," Arthur replied. He confessed to everything, Agnes. The fake medical bills, the stolen $8,000. And he admitted to using company time to research and book that cruise. My heart ached, a sharp maternal pain beneath the cold fury. What happens now? Beatrice gave him two choices. Resign immediately with a neutral reference and a legally binding repayment plan, or be fired for cause and face criminal prosecution. Which did he choose? He's thinking about it. He has until 3 p.m. I looked at my watch. 11:45. Arthur, Chloe just told me they're going on a Mediterranean cruise, paid for with a company deal. Margaret, Sterling Global doesn't have travel deals for employees. That money came from somewhere else. The pieces clicked into a horrifying picture. The financial deception was even deeper than I'd imagined. I hung up and went downstairs. Chloe was pacing the living room. "More coffee?" she asked, her voice strained. "I think I'll rest. It's been a draining morning." I went back to the guest room and waited. The hours ticked by. 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m. At 4:30, we heard a car in the driveway. Chloe rushed to the window. "He's back. And he's not alone." I joined her. David was walking up the path with another man, tall, stern, and carrying a briefcase. Mr. Richardson from legal. We gathered in the living room. David looked decades older. "Chloe, Mom. This is Mr. Richardson from Sterling Global's legal department." His voice was flat, dead. "I need to tell you both something." Chloe sank onto the sofa, her face a mask of dread. "I am no longer employed at Sterling Global. As of today, I've resigned." "What?" Chloe shrieked. "David, what did you do?" Mr. Richardson spoke. "Mr. Pembroke obtained a substantial salary advance under false pretenses. He claimed it was for emergency medical treatment for his mother." All eyes turned to me. I arranged my face into stunned confusion. "Medical treatment? David, what is he talking about?" "I told them you needed expensive respiratory therapy," he mumbled, staring at the floor. "That your insurance wouldn't cover it." "David, I have arthritis. I don't have respiratory problems." I let my voice crack perfectly. "I know, Mom. I know. I lied." Chloe was staring at him, her mouth agape. "You lied to steal from your employer?" "It wasn't stealing. I was going to pay it back." $8,000, Mr. Richardson said coolly, with no payments made in 6 weeks. "David," I said, my tone gentle but firm, "where did that money go?" "Bills, the mortgage, living expenses." "The cruise," Chloe whispered, the horror dawning on her. "We put a $5,000 deposit on the cruise last week." The room was utterly silent. The clock on the mantel ticked loudly. "Mr. Pembroke has 30 days to begin repayment," Mr. Richardson said, gathering his papers. "If he fails, the matter will be referred to the district attorney's office." After he left, the silence in the room was heavier than any I had ever known. David collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. Chloe just stared into space, shell-shocked. "There's more," David said, his voice hollow. "My resignation means we lose our health insurance at the end of the month. The promotion, it was never real. I was about to be fired anyway." Chloe stood up and walked out of the room without a word. We heard the back door slam. David looked at me, his eyes full of a desperate, childish fear. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "David," I said, my voice quiet but clear in the silent room. "You stole $8,000 by lying about my health, but you were also planning a luxury cruise and trying to make me pay for an assisted living facility. Where did you think the money for all of that was going to come from?" He had no answer. He just shook his head, defeated. I stood up. "I'm going to stay with a friend tonight." "Mom, please." "Where are you going?" "Which friend?" I paused at the doorway and looked back at my son, the boy I had loved and raised, Now a broken man surrounded by the ruins of the life he had built on lies. I'm going to sleep somewhere I am wanted, David. Not just tolerated. I suggest you spend tonight figuring out how you're going to tell your wife that you've lost everything because you chose to lie, cheat, and lock your mother out in the cold. I walked out of that house, across the lawn, and back to Arthur's warm, welcoming home. I didn't look back. The snow had long since melted, but the coldness in my heart toward my son's actions remained. Yet as Arthur opened the door with a kind smile, I felt a different warmth, the warmth of self-respect, of justice, and of a future I would build entirely on my own terms. The summer sun streamed through the large windows of my cozy apartment. It was small, just a one-bedroom in a quiet building for active seniors, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every book on the shelf was a choice I had made for myself. I was tending to my window box herbs when my phone rang. It was Chloe. Hi, Agnes. I wanted to thank you for helping Emma with her history project. She got an A. She's a bright girl. She did all the work. Still, she loves her time with you. Things were different now. Not perfect, but honest. David had gotten a job as a manager at a local hardware store. It was a humbler position, but he was good at it, and he seemed, for the first time in years, free of the terrible stress that came with maintaining his facade. He was in counseling, working to understand the choices he had made. They had sold Chloe's expensive SUV. Emma was thriving in public school. The Mediterranean cruise had been canceled, the deposit lost. They were living on a strict, realistic budget. I had not moved back in. I had used my savings and a small reverse mortgage on my old house to buy this apartment. I had my independence and I guarded it fiercely. Agnes, Chloe said, her voice hesitant, do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd done things differently from the start? I looked around my sunny living room at the photograph of Arthur, Beatrice, and me from her retirement dinner, smiling on my mantel. I thought of my book club, my volunteer work at the local library, the peace that filled my days. No, Chloe, I said, and I meant it. I think everything happened exactly as it was meant to. We said our goodbyes, and I finished watering my herbs. From my window, I could see Arthur in his garden waving. I waved back. That cold February night had been the worst and best thing that the silence in Arthur's guest room that night was a profound thing, broken only by the soft tick of a grandfather clock downstairs. I wasn't sleeping. I was replaying the day, the shattered look on David's face, the hollow sound of Chloe's silence. A part of me, the mother part, ached with a grief so deep it felt physical. But the newer part, the survivor, felt a grim, quiet satisfaction. He had chosen this path. Every lie, every act of disrespect, had led him to that moment in the living room with Mr. Richardson. The next morning, I dressed in my own clothes, which Arthur had kindly retrieved from David's house. I felt a need to be in my own skin. When I came downstairs, Beatrice was at the table, her laptop open beside a plate of toast. He chose resignation, she said without preamble. He signed the repayment agreement this morning. He has 3 years to pay back the $8,000. If he misses a single payment, the company pursues legal action. 3 years, I murmured. That's a long shadow to live under. It's more grace than he deserved, Beatrice said, her tone leaving no room for argument. The legal department wanted to make an example of him. I convinced them that a public scandal wouldn't serve the company's interests. I knew what that meant. She had stuck her neck out for him. For me. Thank you, Beatrice. Don't thank me. He's your son. But understand, Agnes, his career in corporate management is over. No one will hire him with this on his record. I nodded. That chapter was closed. The question was, what would he write in the next one? As if on cue, my phone buzzed. David. Mom. Can we talk? Please. I showed the message to Beatrice. Your move, Agnes, she said. You hold all the cards now. Play them wisely. I texted back. I'll be at the Sunnyside Diner on Main Street in 1 hour. You can come alone. I needed neutral ground. A public place where voices would have to be kept low and dramatics minimized. The diner smelled of coffee and bacon. I chose a booth in the back. David arrived 5 minutes late, looking like he hadn't slept. He slid into the booth across from me, his hands trembling slightly as he wrapped them around the mug of coffee the waitress brought. Mom, he began, his voice raw. I don't even know where to start. Start with the truth, David. All of it. And so he did. The story tumbled out of him, a confession of a year-long slide into desperation. The pressure to keep up with the Joneses, the credit card debt he'd hidden from Chloe, the fear of being seen as a failure. The first fudged report at work, the first missed deadline he tried to blame on a colleague. It was a cascade of small moral compromises that led to the one big catastrophic lie. The medical emergency, it seemed like the only way. I thought the promotion was a sure thing. I thought I could pay it back before anyone noticed. And me. I asked, my voice quiet. Where did I fit into this only way? He finally met my eyes and his were swimming with tears. You were convenient. I'm so ashamed to say that. I thought if we could get you settled somewhere, it would free up money, reduce the stress at home. I was drowning, Mom, and I was grabbing at anything to stay afloat, even if it meant pushing you under. The stark honesty was more shocking than any lie he'd told. You told me you hoped I would freeze, David. He flinched as if I'd struck him. I didn't mean it. I was so angry. Angry at myself, at work, at the world. And I took it all out on you. It's the single greatest regret of my life. We sat in silence for a long moment, the clatter of plates and the diner's chatter filling the space between us. What happens now, David? To you? To your family? I start at Henderson's Hardware on Monday, he said, a faint glimmer of pride in his voice. Stockroom manager. It's a job. It's honest work. We're selling the Lexus. Chloe's looking for a full-time job. We're going to sell the house. This was news. The house. We can't afford the mortgage. Not anymore. We'll have to downsize. Rent an apartment, probably. He looked down at his coffee. The $25,000 you gave us for the down payment. I don't know when we'll be able to pay you back. Consider it a gift, I said, though the words cost me. A final one. He nodded, understanding the finality in my tone. And us, David? What happens to us? He looked at me, his expression pleading. I want you in my life, Mom. In Emma's life. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for a chance to earn back your trust. Not your money. Not a place in your home. Just a place in your life. I finished my tea and placed a $20 bill on the table. Trust isn't given, David. It's earned. You can start by being the man I raised you to be. Be honest with your wife. Be present for your daughter. Be on time for your job at the hardware store. I stood up to leave. Where are you going? He asked, a panicked look on his face. Are you moving away? I'm moving forward, David, I said. You can decide whether you want to be a part of that journey or not. The choice this time is yours. I walked out of the diner and into the weak winter sun, leaving my son to ponder the price of his choices and the long, hard road to redemption. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. With Arthur's help, I found a lovely, compact one-bedroom apartment in a well-maintained building for active seniors called Maple Court. It wasn't an assisted living facility. It was simply a place where people my age lived independently. It had a community garden, a library, and a buzzing social calendar I had every intention of ignoring for the time being. Using the proceeds from the sale of my and Harold's home, which I had been too grief-stricken to deal with before, I paid for the apartment in cash. It was a liberating feeling, a security I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer dependent on the whims of my son or the generosity of neighbors. This was mine. Beatrice, before returning to Toronto, took me to lunch. I've had our legal department draw up something, she said, handing me a sealed envelope. It's a simple will. It leaves the bulk of your estate to Emma, in a trust that David and Chloe cannot touch. There are also specific small bequests for Arthur and myself should we outlive you. I hope you don't find it presumptuous. I was touched. It's not presumptuous. It's protective. Thank you, Beatrice. Family isn't always about blood, Agnes, she said, patting my hand. It's about who shows up for you in the cold. Arthur became my steadfast companion. He helped me move, assembling IKEA furniture with an engineer's precision and a comedian's running commentary. We settled into a comfortable rhythm of morning coffee and evening crosswords. It was a friendship born of crisis, but it was deepening into something permanent and cherished. One afternoon, a small figure appeared at my apartment door. Emma, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes wide. "Granny Agnes?" Dad said it was okay if I visited. He dropped me off. My heart swelled. "Emma, my darling. Come in, come in." She explored the small apartment with the solemn curiosity of a child. "It's cozy," she declared, which from an 11-year-old was high praise. "I like your balcony. Would you like to help me plant some herbs out there when it gets warmer?" I asked. She nodded enthusiastically. We sat at my small table and I made her hot chocolate. She was quiet for a while, stirring the marshmallows. "Mom and Dad are fighting a lot," she said softly, not looking at me. "About money. And about you. What do they say about me?" "Mom says Dad ruined everything. Dad says he's sorry. They both say they miss you." She finally looked up, her eyes glistening. "I miss you, Granny. It's not the same without you there." I reached across the table and took her small hand. "I miss you too, sweetheart. But you can visit me here anytime. This can be your second home. Promise?" "I promise." That visit was a balm to my soul. The rift with David and Chloe was one thing, but the thought of losing Emma was another entirely. Her presence was a thread of continuity, a bridge to a future where I could still be a grandmother, even if I was no longer a live-in mother. David kept his distance, respecting my boundaries. He would text me occasional updates. He'd painted a fence at work. He'd fixed a leaky sink in their rental apartment. Small, mundane things that were his way of saying, "I'm here. I'm trying." It was a start. Spring was beginning to timidly assert itself when I had another visitor. I opened my door to find Chloe standing there, clutching a bakery box and looking nervous. "Agnes. Hi. I brought you a lemon loaf." I was so surprised I just stood there for a moment. "Chloe, come in." She stepped inside, her eyes darting around the apartment, taking in the photos of Harold and me, the stack of books by my chair, the vibrant Afghan I was crocheting. It was a life whole and complete without them. "It's lovely," she said, and she sounded like she meant it. "Thank you. Would you like some tea?" We sat in the same spots Emma and I had a week before. The silence was awkward, thick with unspoken words. "I'm sorry," she blurted out finally. "For everything. For the way I spoke to you. For wanting you gone." A tear traced a path down her cheek. I was so wrapped up in the life I thought we were supposed to have. I couldn't see the family we actually had. I let David's lies become my truth because it was easier than facing our reality. This was a level of self-awareness I hadn't expected from Chloe. When he lost his job and I realized the cruise money was gone, it was like waking up from a beautiful, stupid dream. We're living in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, Agnes. I work full-time as a receptionist. David comes home smelling of sawdust and paint. It's humbling. "It sounds honest," I said. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "It is. And strangely, it's better. The fighting has stopped. We're a team again, trying to dig our way out. And Emma, she seems happier. Less anxious." "Children feel tension," I said, "even when they don't understand it." "Agnes," she said, leaning forward, "I know I have no right to ask this, but I hope in time you can forgive me. I miss you. Not your help with the bills or the cleaning. I miss you. Your steadiness. Your wisdom." I looked at this woman, my daughter-in-law, who had been my adversary and was now sitting in my home, humbled and sincere. The anger I had carried for so long began to loosen its grip. "Forgiveness isn't a switch, Chloe," I said gently. "It's a path. You've taken the first step by being here. We can walk it together one day at a time." She left an hour later, the lemon loaf uneaten on the table, but a new understanding between us. The fortress around my heart had developed another gate. With Arthur's enthusiastic help, I claimed a small plot in the Maple Court Community Garden. Gardening had been Harold's passion, and I had always been his appreciative audience. Now I found my own hands itching for the feel of soil. It was messy, frustrating work. I overwatered the tomatoes and underwatered the carrots. But Arthur was a patient teacher, and slowly green things began to grow. Our gardening sessions became the highlight of my day. We'd sit on a little bench between our plots, drinking iced tea and watching the bees buzz around the lavender. "You know," Arthur said one sunny afternoon, "Beatrice thinks we're sweet." I felt a blush creep up my neck. And what do you think? I think she might be right, he said, smiling at me, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. It was the first hint of something more than friendship, and it settled over me not with the drama of youth, but with the gentle warmth of a late-season sun. It was a possibility, not a pressure. One Saturday, David, Chloe, and Emma came to see the garden. Emma was enthralled, helping me pick ripe cherry tomatoes and popping them straight into her mouth. David hung back, his hands in his pockets, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Later, as they were leaving, he lingered by the car. "You look happy, Mom." "I am, David." "He seems like a good man," he said, nodding toward Arthur, who was waving from his porch. "He is." David nodded, a look of acceptance on his face. "I'm glad." It was a simple statement, but it felt like a milestone. He was learning to be happy for me, even as his own life was still being rebuilt. The reconciliation was not a straight line. Life, I had learned, rarely is. It was a rainy Tuesday when my phone rang. It was Chloe, and she was hysterical. "Agnes, it's David. He's in the hospital." My heart stopped. What happened? An accident at the store. A shelving unit collapsed. His leg is broken, maybe his arm. They're doing x-rays. Arthur drove me to the hospital. We found Chloe and Emma in the waiting room. Emma clinging to her mother, both of them pale and scared. The doctor told us David had a compound fracture in his leg and a broken wrist. He would need surgery and would be out of work for at least 2 months. The financial implications hung in the air, unspoken but terrifying. No work meant no pay. The repayment plan for the $8,000 would be in immediate jeopardy. When David was out of surgery, groggy and in pain, his first words to me were, "The payment, Mom. I'm going to miss the payment." In that moment, he wasn't a fraudulent son or a struggling father. He was my little boy, scared and hurting. "Let me worry about that," I said, brushing the hair from his forehead. I called Beatrice from the hallway. I explained the situation. I heard her sigh on the other end of the line. "This is exactly the kind of legitimate hardship the repayment plan was designed to accommodate, Agnes," she said. "I'll speak to legal. We'll put a 3-month moratorium on payments. No penalties." The relief was so profound my knees felt weak. I went back into the room and told David. He closed his eyes, a single tear escaping down his temple. "Thank you," he whispered. But the problem of their daily expenses remained. That night, back at my apartment, I made a decision. I called Chloe. "I am not going to give you money," I said firmly, "but I am going to pay your rent for the next 2 months. Consider it a loan against the down payment money I gave you. You can pay me back when David is back on his feet." There was a long silence on the other end, then a choke sob. "Thank you, Agnes. Thank you for not letting us drown." It was the right thing to do. Not a handout that would foster renewed dependency, but a hand up that respected their dignity and my boundaries. I was learning the difference. During David's convalescence, he was bored and frustrated, trapped on the sofa with his leg in a cast. To keep his mind occupied, he started sketching. He'd always been good with his hands, and he began drawing designs for custom shelving units, tool organizers, and other woodworking projects. One evening, I was looking at his sketches. They were good, really good, practical, elegant, and clever. "You should make these," I said. He laughed bitterly. "With what tools? With what space?" An idea, wild and fully formed, popped into my head. I went to see Arthur. "The old garage behind your house," I said. "The one you use for storage. How would you feel about having a tenant?" Arthur's eyebrows shot up. "A tenant? David. He needs a workshop. I'll pay for the first 6 months of rent and for him to get a set of basic tools. It would be a business loan. He pays me back with interest from his profits." Arthur looked at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Agnes Pembroke, you are a formidable woman." We presented the idea to David. He was speechless, looking from the sketches to me to Arthur. You do that for me? After everything?" "This isn't a gift, David," I said, my voice businesslike. "This is an investment. I've seen your work. I believe in the product. But it's on you. The effort, the quality, the sales. This is your chance to build something that is truly yours." No lies, no corporate ladder. Just honest work. The fire that lit in his eyes was something I hadn't seen in years. It was the fire of purpose. The next 2 months were a whirlwind. David, on crutches, directed operations from a chair in Arthur's garage. Chloe handled the books and used her newfound social media skills to create an online presence. Emma designed the logo, a simple, elegant hammer and measuring tape with the words Pembroke & Son Custom Woodworking. The & Son was David's idea. It's for Grandpa, he told me. A way to honor him. The first order was from a neighbor at Maple Court who wanted a custom spice rack. Then another for a bookshelf. Then a local cafe ordered 20 custom-made tabletops. The business, born from desperation and nurtured with a second chance, began to thrive. David was transformed. The stress lines on his face softened. He stood taller. He was proud of what he was creating with his own 2 hands. He was paying back my loan ahead of schedule. One evening, he came to my apartment and handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for the first 2 months' rent I had covered after his accident. The business is doing well, he said, a genuine, unburdened smile on his face. We're going to be okay. I looked at the check, then at my son. The liar, the thief, was gone. In his place was a craftsman, a husband, a father. The road had been long and painful, but he had finally arrived at a place of integrity. I know you are, I said. And for the first time in a very long time, I absolutely believed it. Summer bloomed in full glorious force. My garden was a riot of color, and my life felt similarly vibrant. I had my home, my friendship with Arthur that was blossoming into a quiet, deep love, my repaired relationship with my family, and a sense of peace I had never known was possible. I was in the garden, harvesting basil, when Arthur came to find me. He had a strange, nervous energy about him. Agnes, he said, there's something I want to ask you. My heart did a little flip. Yes, Arthur. Well, Beatrice is coming to visit next month. And I was thinking my house is plenty big, but it's awfully quiet. And your apartment is lovely, but don't you find it a bit small sometimes? I smiled, my eyes twinkling. Are you proposing we become roommates, Arthur McAllister? He chuckled, the nervousness fading. I suppose I am. Not roommates exactly. More like partners. What do you say? We could knock down the fence between our garden plots. It wasn't a marriage proposal. It was better. It was a proposal for a shared life, built on friendship, respect, and the gentle affection of our years. I think that sounds like a wonderful idea, I said, taking his hand. We decided to have a family dinner to make the announcement. David, Chloe, and Emma came along with Beatrice, who was visiting for the weekend. We gathered around Arthur's large dining table, a table that would soon be our table. The conversation was lively, full of laughter. Emma was telling a story about school. David and Chloe were finishing each other's sentences about a new big client, and Beatrice was quizzing Arthur on his plans for the garden merger. I looked around the table. This was my family, not defined solely by blood, but by choice, by forgiveness, and by the unwavering support that had been offered in my darkest hour. David caught my eye and raised his glass. To Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. And to Arthur. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, everyone echoed. As the clinking of glasses subsided, Emma piped up. Does this mean I get 2 gardens to play in? Yes, my love, I said, pulling her into a hug. It means you get the whole world. A year to the day after that fateful night on the porch, I was sitting on our patio, Arthur's and mine, watching the fireflies dance over our merged garden. David's business had outgrown Arthur's garage, and he had rented a proper storefront on Main Street. Pembroke & Son was a local success story. Chloe had been promoted to office manager. They were still in their apartment, but they were saving wisely this time for a small house. The door slid open and Arthur joined me, handing me a cup of tea and sitting in the chair beside me. He took my hand, his thumb stroking my knuckles. It was a simple, comfortable gesture that spoke of a deep and abiding love. Happy anniversary, he said softly. I looked at him confused. What anniversary? The anniversary of the day a formidable, fascinating woman literally crashed into my life, he said, his eyes twinkling. I laughed, squeezing his hand. I didn't crash. I was gracefully rescued. Semantics, he said, smiling. We sat in a comfortable silence, listening to the crickets. I thought about the journey of the past year. The betrayal, the cold, the fear, the struggle, the forgiveness, the healing, the growth. I had lost the family I thought I had, but I had built a new, stronger, more honest one in its place. I had learned that it's never too late to start over, that your value isn't determined by what you can do for others, but by who you are. That strength isn't about never falling, but about getting back up, even when you're standing in the snow in your nightgown. What are you thinking about, my dear? Arthur asked. I'm thinking, I said, leaning my head against his shoulder, that winter doesn't last forever, and the thaw can be more beautiful than you ever imagined. The first frost of the new year came early, painting the garden in a delicate crystalline lace. From the warmth of our kitchen, Arthur and I watched the sun rise, turning the white crystals to a million tiny diamonds. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from David. A picture of the front of his shop, with the new sign he'd just hung. Pembroke & Son is 2024. Beneath it he'd written, couldn't have done it without you, Mom. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. I showed it to Arthur. He put his arm around me and kissed my temple. You did that, Agnes. You didn't just save yourself that night. You saved him too. I looked out at the frost-kissed garden, a testament to the cycle of endings and beginnings. The cold was back, but this time I was on the inside looking out. I was warm, I was loved, and I was exactly where I was meant to be. The cold had once been my enemy. Now it was just a season. And I had learned that I could weather any season life threw at me. No, Arthur, I said, turning to smile at the man I loved. We saved each other.